Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and let's catch up from Guilds of Ravnica preview season. So I'm rather far behind in the preview season because there are just so many cards coming out, so much stuff to do for the channel, and just tons of stuff going on. We have a preview card dropping tomorrow as well, so look forward to that. But right now I'm going to kind of quickly go through the preview cards coming out so far and talk about them just kind of a quick, casual way. But first, we want to talk about the Vraska Golgari Queen Mythic Edition version that got spoiled as well after Vraska Golgari Queen was spoiled, and looks pretty. I like it a lot. I think it looks pretty nice. One thing I will say is that I wish all of these cards were in the set. I talk about that in another video. I'll probably link up here or something, but yeah, it's just it's really disappointing that these kind of cool cards like this can't be obtained unless you buy it off of online stores, and if you're not in US or Canada, then you can't buy it at all, basically, which is awful. But let's move on to the actual spoilers today, or previews today. You can't say spoilers anymore, right? Let's go on to previews here. We've got Glow Spore Shaman, a 2-mana 3/1 Elf Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from among them, from your graveyard on top of them, not among them, from your graveyard. So, interesting. It's kind of a worse Seder Wayfinder, which is not terrible, but not really great. I do like how the land on top might be like a once every 4 or 5 times you'll use this ability. That's fine. The thing that really does stand out to me as something that I really dislike about it is that it's got 1 toughness. That's awful. It can trade with something really nice, but it's basically Raptor Companion, and I don't know. I'm not really feeling it. It's an uncommon as well, so it might be something you might want to get into if you're a Golgari and draft and sealed. But as far as standard and modern and all that stuff goes, I don't see this seeing any kind of play whatsoever. Moving up here, we have a card that needs to be translated, so I'm going to look over here. This is Sky Knight Legionnaire, a 3-mana creature human knight with flying haste. It's also a 2/2. This is a fine draft pick. It's common, which is very scary for me. Because you'll see this quite a bit in draft and sealed. This won't see any kind of standard play or anything like that. It's definitely a draft and sealed card. Very good for that particular format. Very good for just being a low to the ground attacker. For 3, fly haste, that's amazing. And just 2 in the air, always super good in draft and sealed. Always going to be a high draft pick if you're in the Boros colors, which is, again, another really strange instance here for the colors here, but still pretty good as well. Moving up, we have Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice. This is a mythic rare for us. A 4-mana 2/5 flyer with Mentor. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target creature you control. Until end of turn, that creature gains +2/+0, gains trample if it's red, and gains vigilance if it's white. So if it's a double thing like Aurelia here, it gains trample and vigilance, which is ridiculous. I do think Aurelia is very, very good. Obviously, it's a mythic, so you won't be seeing it much in draft and sealed, but I do think it's going to be a highly pre-ordered card for standard. It just seems like one of the cards where in Boros colors, this card is just going to be a wild card. It's going to be super powerful. Again, one of the few cards where Mentor actually matters and is super important because of the way because of the way toughness works here. That's the one thing that really kind of annoys me about all the Mentor stuff. They all have such weak toughness. I really do like this one having 5 toughness. It's very powerful. Being a flyer means it'll get in attacks for free most of the time too. Being able to pump itself as well is also super good as well. So really like Aurelia here. Can't wait to play this in standard, but probably won't see any kind of play outside of standard. Moving up here, we have Orchan Assassin, or is it Aurelia Assassin? Is that how you pronounce it, I guess? A 3-mana 1/1 Death Toucher. All creatures able to block Aurelia Assassin do so. Love this card. This card is super good for draft and sealed, able to get rid of their highest attacker, highest blocker, if they only have 1 creature on their side of the field that you want to get rid of. It's kind of a removal spell on a body, which is interesting, but it kind of gives you the option of being able to attack out if you want to. So if your opponent has 1 big bomb on the battlefield and you have this on the battlefield, and attacking in, this is going to be able to trade with that creature unless that creature is indestructible. So very good draft and sealed pick. Not very good in standard or anything like that, but a great card for draft and sealed. Great bomb in Golgari again. Moving up, we have Knight of Autumn. This card is a card that a lot of people are losing their minds for in Modern, basically replacing 2 slots in the sideboard. A 3-mana 2/1 Dryad Knight. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on the Knight of Autumn, or destroy target artifact or enchantment, or gain 4 life. This is doing a ton of stuff. This is Kitchen Sphinx plus artifact and enchantment removal, and that's amazing. Love this card. I think it's gonna be very powerful in Modern and more Eternal formats. I think it's gonna be very powerful in Standard as well. And if you get into this as a rare in Draft and Sealed, I mean, it's still a 4/3, which is not bad if you want to do that, but it can also gain you life as well as remove something as well. So I think this is going to be a very big, like, first pickable card in Draft and Sealed. It's not very powerful, but it can turn into a 4/3, which makes it more powerful than normal for this kind of card where it has multiple, like, modular things. So I think this card's quite good for Draft and Sealed. Basically, every format, this card's going to see some sort of play. Next up here, we have Affectionate Indrik. This art here. What is this art? A 6-mana 4/4 beast. When it enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. Good removal in Draft and Sealed. Not going to see any kind of play outside of Draft and Sealed. It's also an uncommon as well, which is kind of interesting. It's a 6-mana 4/4. You'd think this would be a common, but I guess because of the fight mechanic being on top of this creature makes it an uncommon for us. But not terrible, not bad, and by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think it's you know, an okay bomb for Draft and Sealed. Not going to see any kind of standard play. Moving up here, we have Venerated Loxodon, a 5-mana 4/4 Elephant Cleric with Convoke. This is super interesting. Enters a battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature you convoked with it. Now, this is a card that I feel like we'll see some white weenie play in Standard, as well as be a fantastic card for us in Draft and Sealed. Being a mono white card as well is very, very good for this situation. Maybe thinking it might have been a white green card, but I'm so glad that it's just a you know, 4 colorless and a white, because you know, you can make this an 8/8 if you want to, which is amazing. Love this card. I think this card is super powerful for every format you're going to see it in. Moving on from this, we have Blood Operative, a 3-mana 3/1 vampire assassin with lifelink. When it enters a battlefield, you may exile target card from a graveyard. Whenever you surveil, if Blood Operative is in your graveyard, you may pay 3 life. If you do, return Blood Operative to your hand. Super interesting card. I'm not so sure it's gonna be that great in Draft and Sealed. It might be a cool card to use in Standard some way, but I'm really kind of stretching to see where this is gonna fit in those formats. A 3/1 lifelinker is fine in Draft and Sealed. It's just not a rare pickable card for me. It's one of those cards that it probably can be abused, but in some way. But not really, can really see that at the moment. I think it would go well into a Surveil deck, like a nice Dimir Surveil deck in Draft and Sealed, kind of as an afterthought. In Standard, it might see some play thanks to it being able to come back often. But for now, I'm really kind of just, you know, skeptical on this. It might be in a weird, like, combo deck maybe in Standard because of all the Surveil mechanics going on. But let's move on from this card real quick. We've got a card that needs to be translated here. Love the art on this one, though. This is Ladov Captain, a 3-mana Elf Knight. It's a 2/2. Whenever Ladov Captain attacks, you may tap any number of untapped creatures you control. The Captain gets +1/+1 for each creature tapped this way until end of turn. You can also pay 5 and create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. I'm not really sure what's going on in this set, but there are so many token generation cards right now that really are expensive to get going in the format, and it's very confusing to me. 5 mana for a 1/1 lifelinker is just so dumb. I don't really know what's going on here. That probably should have been 3 mana instead of 5, but okay. In Draft and Sealed, this is okay. I think this is a really good way to end a match, especially if you have a lot of small, low-to-the-ground creatures. Being able to make this a 5/5 or a 6/6 is super impactful. As far as Standard goes, this is a little too slow, a little too unplayable for that format, but I do think it's quite fun in Draft and in Sealed. Moving on, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is going to be Giant Soldier, a 6-mana 5/5 with Vigilance. Whenever it attacks, it deals 1 damage to each creature defending player controls. This card is super good in Draft and Sealed. This is a bomb if I've ever saw one. A 6-mana 5/5 with Vigilance is already fantastic, but something that deals damage to their entire board state is amazing. Can definitely get rid of any kind of small creatures on their side of the field. So in Draft and Sealed, this card is amazing. I don't think this card will see any kind of standard play, but it is quite powerful for Boros, so it might see some sideboard play if we're up against a more token-based strategy. So for Draft and Sealed, though, this card is always going to be a high pick for me. A great card in the bread, thought process. Moving on here, we have another card that needs to be translated. This is Conclave Centaur, a 4-mana 4/4 creature with Vigilance, and whenever it dies, create 2 green and white 2/2 Elf Knight creature tokens with Vigilance. This is very, very good as well. Very good for Celestia. And, 4 mana for a 4/4 that creates 2 2/2s. This is sort of like Thragtusk, kind of. It doesn't gain you life, obviously. But it's a card that once it's removed, it creates 2 other creatures, which I think is super powerful. Obviously, the mana requirements on this card is super, hard to deal with. But in Draft and Sealed, this card might be super good for you as an uncommon. Did I say super more times there? More than enough times there? But I think this card's super good in Draft and Sealed. Probably won't see any kind of standard play thanks to its harsh mana requirements. But you never know. A card that makes 2 2/2s after dying is pretty good. Moving up here, we have Crackling Drake, almost said Cackling Drake, a 4-mana star 4 flyer. Its power is equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your own graveyard. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card as well. So this is sort of like Enigma Drake from the Amonkhet block that got really recently reprinted in the core set block. I like this card a lot in Draft and Sealed. Always going to be a high pick for me for that particular set. If you're in Is It as well. Now, keep in mind, Draft and Sealed is always about creatures and kind of attacking in. So this is kind of an interesting but kind of worse version of Enigma Drake. It's a little bit better in that you draw a card, but it's a little bit worse in that it's 4 mana. And the mana requirements are a little bit more strict. But I do like it for Draft and Sealed, and think there might be a Spell Matters deck now that we have 2 types of creatures that are basically the same creature in Standard. So we could build an Is It Spells deck around this Drake and the other Drake from Amonkhet block, or the new core set block, since Amonkhet is rotating. Next up here for us, we have Hunted Witness. This is a 1-mana 1/1 human. When it dies, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. Doom Traveler, this is not, doesn't create a flyer, which is kind of sad, but it does create a 1/1 with lifelink, which is fine. Kind of wish you would turn it into like maybe a vampire or something. That'd be cool too. But I think this card is fine. I think it's a very high draft pick for you. Very good bread and butter card for you in Draft and Sealed. As far as Standard goes, this might see some play in a weird white weenie deck, or like a like maybe a Sacrifice Outlet deck, like an Orzhov deck, maybe in the future. So keep an eye on it for that. But I do like this card a lot in it as far as a Draft and Sealed pick for us. Next up here, we've got Swiftblade Vindicator, a 2-mana 1/1 human soldier with double strike, vigilance, and trample. Get an aura on this thing, it's going to go crazy. I do think that the white-red auras deck right now is kind of gearing up to be super powerful, and Swiftblade is an amazing card for that. It is kind of slotted as a rare here, so I'm really kind of nervous about that. But I do think it's going to be very powerful in Standard once you have more like, better use of auras in the Standard pool instead of the Draft and Sealed pool. If you get this as your rare in Draft and Sealed, kind of be very careful unless you get into a lot of equipment or a lot of auras, because we haven't really seen that many just yet out of this set. So I do think that Vindicator is a good card, but I do think it's kind of dangerous in that it just doesn't do anything once it hits the battlefield, because all those abilities on a 1/1 aren't that crazy until you put something on top of it. So it could just be a card that just dies to removal immediately in Draft and Sealed. Moving up here, we have a card that needs to be translated as well. This is a maze-looking card. Really like it a lot. This is Detour, a 4-mana sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic lands or gates. Put them onto the battlefield tapped. Kind of a better explosive vegetation, which is kind of cool. I'm not too hot on explosive vegetation myself, because I do think it's one of those cards that it's just like close enough to be very, very good if it was only 3 mana, but since it's 4 mana, it's just kind of too slow for the format. But never say never. We do have Llanowar Elves back in the format now, so it could be a situation where explosive vegetation does ramp into a ramp deck in Standard to be super good. As far as this being a card in Draft and Sealed, if you have a ton of bombs in your deck and you're playing Selesnya or any kind of thing that needs green, this card is probably okay, and it can grab you gates as well, which gates are, if you don't know, dual lands technically that come in tapped, which is very good for Draft and Sealed. So I think this card is super good for Draft and Sealed, but might not be that great in Standard. We'll see what happens, but I do think that the art in this card is super good. Next up, we have Omnispell Adept, a 5-mana 3/4 rare human wizard. You can pay 3, tap it. You may cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand without paying its mana cost. This is a super interesting card. I love the art on this one as well. I think this card might be doing something super important for us in the Wizards deck, and Is It? But I do think that in Draft and Sealed, this card might just do nothing. It's a 3/4, which is not terrible, but for 5 mana, you kind of expect a bigger body in Draft and Sealed, especially for a rare. This is kind of built around more Commander, more Brawl, and more Standard stuff. So I really think this is probably going to find a home in Commander or Brawl, but probably not going to find a home in Standard. It's so close to being amazing because it can make a really expensive instant and sorcery card from our hand be only 3 mana, which is super interesting. But Adept just might be like immediately killed as soon as it hits the battlefield, thanks to cards like Assassin's Trophy. Moving on here, we have Glaive of the Guild Pack. This is a 2-mana artifact equipment. Equip creature gets +1/+0 for each gate you control, and has Vigilance and Menace. Then you can also equip this for 3 colorless as well. So there's some people on Twitter talking about how this is not really a glaive, and I can kind of agree with that. But we just see the hilt here, which looks like a sword, not a glaive. So would love to see more of this shot for sure. But I do think this card, as far as a good uncommon pick for you in Draft and Sealed, is quite good. Not going to see any kind of Standard play, but in a Gates Matters deck in Draft and Sealed, this card is pretty okay. But it doesn't do much other than maybe giving +1 or +2 +0. Giving Vigilance and Menace, though, is a nice added bonus as well. Moving on here, we have Ritual of Soot. This is a 4-mana sorcery. Destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less. This is a nice, like, you know, board wipe. I think this card's pretty good in Draft and Sealed. This card will probably see play in a sideboard of a control deck somehow in Standard. Won't likely see play in Modern or anything like that, but probably will see play in a commander list if an opponent is playing up against a low to the ground strategy. They may want to have this in their 99, being able to board wipe them, and if they have lots of big creatures on their side of the field, then they don't die, and I think that's super cool. So maybe in a Golgari list, this will be really cool as a sideboard card to get rid of all of the smaller creatures on your opponent's side of the field and have all of your big bombs kind of still survive. I think that's interesting there. We'll kind of have to see what happens with this card in Standard, but I think in Draft and Sealed, it's probably all right. Moving up here, we've got Watcher in the Mist, a 5-mana 3/4 spirit with flying. When it enters the battlefield, we get to Surveil for 2. As a common, this is very, very good as a good bomb for you in Draft and Sealed. As a card in Standard, this is probably too expensive to be used, but I do like the art on this card, and I think Surveil might be a good deck archetype to work within in Draft and Sealed, maybe moving into a Standard deck as well. So great common slot, great costs here. A 5-mana 3/4 flyer, I'll take that all day long in Draft and Sealed. Moving up here, we got Creeping Chill, a 4-mana sorcery. Deals 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. When it is put into your graveyard from your library, you may exile it. If you do, Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. This is super interesting. I really like this card a lot as far as being a card that kind of gives me echoes of a card that is in, I want to say Innistrad, Bump in the Night. I think that's the card I'm thinking of right now. Doesn't necessarily do the same thing, obviously, and you need red mana for Bump in the Night to work. But I think Creeping Chill as a card in Draft and Sealed might be quite good because it does, you know, gain you 3 life and another 3 life for hitting the graveyard. So that's pretty nice. Also, I think that this card is also super powerful in just a life gain, life drain deck in Draft and Sealed. Won't see any kind of Standard play just because of how expensive it is. But besides that, like the art on this card as well. I do think this is a card that definitely needs to go into a Surveil deck because the second ability only really works if you Surveil. So that's kind of how the workaround is for that card. Next up here, we've got Trostani Discordant. I think that's how you pronounce that. A 5-mana 1/4 Dryad. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. Already pretty good here. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. So those are automatically 2/2s thanks to Trostani. And at the beginning of your end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own. I'm not really understanding the last little bit of Trostani here. Obviously, if your opponent has taken control of one of your creatures, I guess it matters there, but that's such a narrow ability that I'm not really sure that would really matter that much. Maybe in Draft and Sealed, if there's like a quick take control of target creature card going on, but as far as everything else in this card, it's basically a Regal Caracol, when we're just losing Regal Caracol from Standard thanks to Omnicat recycling out or rotating out. So Trostani is going to take that spot in most of those style decks, but I do think this card is quite good as far as a Mythic in that slot in Standard, but it probably won't see any kind of like useful play in Draft and Sealed, even though it does do a lot of stuff. It goes wide, it pumps your entire board state. I think it's still good, but I don't really know. It's very interesting. But let's move on to another red card here. We got Maximize Velocity, a 1 red mana instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains haste until end of turn. This also has Jumpstart as well. This is nice. I think this is one of the few cards that has Jumpstart right now that probably will see some weird amount of Standard like brewing and playing with. Especially in a mono red aggro deck list. Giving something +1/+1 in haste is very nice. Something like we're killing Phoenix or just a large bomb like a Demanding Dragon on our side of the field. Giving in haste by just paying 1 mana and discarding a card, that's very, very cool. But also just paying 1 mana as well as an instant is super nice as well. So I like this card a lot, although when we saw the art for this card, I kind of thought it was going to be a creature, and I'm kind of disappointed that it's not a creature now, because we won't see most of it, or much of it, now going forward outside of Draft and Sealed, so that's kind of sad. Moving on though, we've got Dimir Spybug, a 2-mana 1/1 insect flyer with Menace. The art here almost makes me think it has Infect, and I wish it did. Whenever you Surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on Dimir Spybug. This is probably one of the premier Dimir cards for you for Surveil and Draft and Sealed. I think it's going to be one of the best cards to pick into. A 3-mana or a 2-mana 1/1 is not bad, but a 2-mana 1/1 flyer that like gets larger as the match goes on, I think is very, very good. Especially when that card has Menace, like this card right here, making it so your opponent has to block with 2 creatures instead of 1. I think this card is very, very powerful. It might see some play even in Standard, depending on how many Surveil cards are in Standard right now. I know we have a lot of cards right now with Surveil, that are quite powerful, and Surveil is just kind of like an afterthought on top of that card. So I think Spybug will probably see some standard play as well as draft and sealed play. Moving up though, we have Enhanced Surveillance, a 2-mana enchantment. You may look at an additional 2 cards each time you surveil, which is ridiculous, and exile Enhanced Surveillance, shuffle your graveyard into your library. This is a very good like anti-mill strategy if you're surveilling, but also if your opponent is milling you, this is just a good sideboard card to bring in game 2 to make sure that you're going to be lasting throughout the match. So good card for that. Not really sure about this card being that powerful in draft and seal. This feels like a card maybe built for standard and like sideboard play. But it could see some nice Dimir stuff going on in draft and sealed, because again, you get to surveil an additional 2 cards each time you surveil, and that is insane that you get to dig so deep. That's crazy. Moving on to another Dimir card, we've got Disinformation Campaign. I was going to say Chaplain for some reason. Campaign, a 3-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card and each opponent discards a card. Each opponent, so this is kind of built towards maybe Commander. Whenever you surveil, return this card to its owner's hand. So you can continue to cast this over and over again. So kind of has a cool recurring ability that might see some play in Brawl and in Commander. As far as draft and sealed goes, this is okay. It's just kind of expensive for what it does. So I do like how it gains us card advantage and our opponent loses card advantage, and we can definitely recast this once we surveil something. So very nice interaction there for draft and sealed. Probably too expensive to see standard play, but very cool in draft sealed. Might see some Commander play if there is a surveil deck out there that wants to use that particular ability. Next up for us, we've got Ladov Guardian, a 4-mana 2/4 Human Knight. Love the art on this one with Convoke. Simple, straightforward. Going to be kind of a high draft pick, I feel like, in draft and sealed. Not going to see any kind of standard play. It's a 2/4, but I do like how the toughness is 4 in draft and sealed. So it's going to be a card that'll probably be coming out on turn 3 or turn 2, not turn 2, turn 3 or turn 4 as a 1-drop almost. We have lots of stuff on the battlefield already, so very powerful for that. And something you definitely want to put like, auras and equipments on top of, thanks to its toughness being already base really, really good. Moving on here, we've got Lotleth Giant. We've had Lotleth Troll in the last Ravnica set. Now we've got Lotleth Giant, a 7-mana 6/5 zombie giant with Undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target opponent for each creature card in your graveyard. So this card is actually very, very good. In draft and sealed, a fantastic bomb. A 7-mana 6/5 is very amazing as far as being a huge bomb, but it doesn't really do anything besides that. The best part about this card is that if it's in the middle of the match, which it will be because it's a 7 mana, your opponent might be at 5, 6, 7 life maybe. Its enter the battlefield ability with Undergrowth might just destroy your opponent on activation. Like the giant may not even have to do anything. It might just come to the battlefield and you might immediately win the game because you have 6 or 7 creatures in your graveyard, ending the match. Very, very powerful for draft and sealed. Won't see any kind of play in standard, I don't feel like, unless someone wants to build like a weird anti-surveil or anti-mill deck against themselves to throw everything and then go giant and then ping their opponent for 20. Maybe that could happen. I highly doubt that. But in draft and sealed though, this is super fun and a great way to close out a match, even though you're not attacking with this card. If you are attacking, it's still a 6/5, so it's going to be, killing whatever it hits too. Moving up here, we've got Piston Fist Cyclops. This is a 3-mana 4/3 Cyclops with Defender. As long as you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, Piston Fist Cyclops can attack as though it didn't have Defender. Very powerful in an Is It strategy in draft and sealed. Kind of nice maybe in a Is It like Spells Matters deck in standard. I really wish this was the Cyclops from previous Ravnica sets where you could pump it up, but sadly this is not. But being at the common slot means you're probably going to see this quite a bit in draft and sealed, so really like this card as being a way that you have lots of sorceries and instant speed spells you want to play on your turn to get an attack for 4 against your opponent, and I really like that. Moving on up, we've got Perihelion Patrol, is that how I pronounce that? This is a 4-mana 2/3 Human Knight Flyer, Vigilance, and Mentor. This is not bad at all. Another good Mentor card. Again, we haven't really seen that many good Mentor cards. This one is good again because it's flying, it's Vigilance, so it gets in for attacks basically for free on the first turn it attacks. Triggers Vigilance, or triggers Mentor, and it has a nice toughness as well to be able to last a couple attacks too. My only kind of caveat on this is that it's 2 toughness, or 2 power, not toughness, 2 power, so it makes it a bit more difficult to get Mentor triggers off on multiple attacks. But a 4-mana 2/3 flyer with Vigilance is very good in draft and sealed. It's going to get in a lot of good damage in the air as well. Probably not going to see any kind of standard play though because of how expensive it is for that format. Next up, we've got Loxodon Restore, a 6-mana 3/4 with Convoke. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. this is kind of bad. 6 mana 3/4 is difficult. Obviously, this can be a 4 mana 3/4 or a 3 mana 3/4 or even a 2 mana 3/4. If that's the case in your deck in Draft and Sealed, then probably go for it because it does gain you 4 life, which is very nice, and it's a 3/4 body, so that's pretty good. But kind of slow, kind of insufficient as far as the enter the battlefield ability. Doesn't really do much. If it like gained you 4 life and tapped a creature, I feel like that'd be a lot better. But it's at the common slot, so can't really ask for much there. So not going to see any kind of standard play, but we'll see maybe some light Draft and Sealed play if you're in a Selesnya deck or a Boros deck. Next up, we've got a Book Devourer, a 6 mana 5/4 beast. This art is insane. With Trample, when it deals combat damage to a player, you may discard all cards you have in your hand. If you do, draw that many cards. This is super interesting. I think this card might be seeing some play in a standard deck for sure. I also think this card might see some play in, I don't really know, maybe Modern or Commander, probably Commander or Brawl, as far as a card just being really fun and flavorful. I do think this card is also very powerful in Draft and Sealed because a 6 mana 4/5 with Trample, it's going to get in damage regardless most of the time, especially if you're, this is your top end bomb and your opponent has a bunch of small creatures. I think this card's very good for Draft and Sealed. But seems more like a flavor win here for Commander or Brawl. Also feels like it's a card that maybe like was a leftover card from Unstable or Battle Bond or something. Just kind of seems like that to me. Moving up, though, we've got a card that needs to be translated. This is Siege Worm, a 7 mana creature worm with Convoke and Trample. Very nice. Honestly, I'm just disappointed they didn't reprint Colossal Dreadmaw. I do think this card is quite good, though. A 7 mana 5/5 with Trample is nice, but making it a 2 mana 5/5 with Trample, if you have lots of Convoke creatures in the battlefield or creatures able to Convoke, I think is very, very good. So I like this card a lot for that. I think this card is going to be a really high pick for you as a bomb in Draft and Sealed. Probably won't see any kind of standard play, but besides that, quite good. Moving right along, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is Sprouting Renewal, a 3 mana sorcery with Convoke. Choose one, create a 2/2 green and white Elf Knight creature token with Vigilance, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. Oh, wow. This card is super interesting for Draft and Sealed. I don't think it'll see any kind of standard play, maybe some sideboard play, as well as being able to make tokens as well as destroy a artifact or enchantment. But very, very good. Lots of good options here for this. And having Convoke on this means it can just be a 1 green mana or, free as well. So very powerful there. Definitely a card you want to put into a deck list in Draft and Sealed because it makes you a 2/2 with Vigilance. That's nice for 3, so pretty good there. And it can also give you pseudo removal in your main deck. Because sometimes, a lot of the removal in Draft and Sealed, you have it in your sideboard and you're bringing it in game 2. And this is just good removal that can be used as a creature in game 1 as well. So I really like that. Next up here, we've got another one. This is Join Shields. This is a 5 mana instant. Untap all creatures you control. They gain indestructible and hexproof until end of turn. This is dumb. I think this card is super fun. Not really going to see kind of standard play because it's 5 mana. This is so expensive for what this card is doing. Really wish it just was like 3 mana or 4 mana. That'd be amazing. But for 5 mana, this is fine. It's not Heroic Intervention. It's not really going to do anything for you that way, but it's okay. A good way to block stuff in your favor, I guess, in Draft and Sealed. So that's why you're going to pick it in that particular format. Next up for us, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is Beacon of Lightning, a 3 mana sorcery. Beacon of Lightning deals damage to the target creature equal to the total number of instant sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. It also has Jumpstart, so another card for the Izzet Spells Mana deck for Draft and Sealed, as well as maybe building this into a standard deck as well. So super interesting, not really kind of wild about it as far as being a burn spell. Could be a powerful burn spell against a creature, but again, it only hits a creature, not an opponent. Which is kind of sad for the amount of mana you're spending for this. But I do think it's quite powerful as a good removal spell in Draft and in Sealed. Next up for us, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is Thief of Sanity, a 3 mana Spectre Flyer. When it deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of these cards face down, then put the rest into that player's graveyard. You may look at it and cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. You may spend mana as though it were any mana of any type to cast this spell. Okay, kind of a Night Veil Spectre kind of thing going on here. Super interesting. I'm really not wild about this being a 2/2 flyer for 3. I mean, it's in Draft and Sealed, that's fine. But for what it's doing at rare, it feels like it's going to be wanting to be a card for standard. And I just don't think it gets there for me. I think the real spot this card will see play in is maybe Modern. Being able to grab something off the top of your opponent's library and use it against them is very powerful in that format. It's a flyer as well, so it will likely get in at least 1 or 2 hits before an opponent deals with it, or maybe if they do deal with it, you're going to get a land out of that thanks to Path to Exile. As far as standard goes, it's a little slow for me, I feel like, but you never know. There are a ton of cards that, taking advantage of your opponent's top deck, and this is definitely one of those cards, so I think this card might see some play, but it's kind of too soon to tell for me for standard. But I do think for modern, this might want to be a card you want to kind of brew around with and play with to see what happens. Next up for us, we've got a card that, again, needs to be translated. This is Final Bortoon, I think that's how you pronounce that. A 3-mana instant. Creatures you control get indestructible until end of turn. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So kind of a weird way to... this is sort of like Glorious End from the Almond Kit block, so it's kind of a card that makes it so you need to win the game after you cast this, which is interesting, but it also gives you the added advantage of making all your creatures indestructible, which is very good. So might see this in standard for sure as a card that like just kind of goes crazy, or in a combo deck maybe. I do think this card is okay in Draft and Sealed as a card that just like, you need just one more attack in, and it doesn't matter if your attacks are good or bad. This is a card that's going to help with that. But it might just be a card you want to pass every single time you see it. It is a Mythic, so you're not going to see it that often in Draft and Sealed, but it is a card that might just do nothing for you in that format too. For Commander and Brawl though, this might find a home there for sure, as just a really like flavorful kind of win, weird way to win a match for sure. Moving on though, we've got a card that's Justice Strike. This is a 2-mana instant. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. All right. I like this card a lot as a good removal spell in Boros. Very powerful there for Draft and Sealed. Probably won't see any kind of standard play, but I love the art on this, and I think that being able for the card to basically hit itself is funny. Moving up here, we've got We Dragonauts. That's amazing. It's a 3-mana 1/3 fairy wizard with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, the Dragonauts get +2/+0 until end of turn. I really like this card because it tells me is it spells decks matter in Draft and Sealed and in Standard. And this is a card that I'm going to see all over the place, and if I see this in Draft, I'm definitely going to pick it because this card is crazy. If you get a lot of spells in your deck list with the other Drake that we just talked about earlier, this is so dumb. This being able to be pumped up to Oblivion in the following turns from this is just crazy, and I can't wait to play an Is It Spells deck in Standard. Moving up here, we've got Hatchery Spider, a 7-mana 5/7 with Reach and Undergrowth. When you cast this spell, reveal the top X cards from your library, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You may put a green permanent card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield, with the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is super interesting, kind of like Genesis Hydra, but not really. A 7-mana 5/7 in like Draft and Sealed is going to be a bomb for you. It's also got Reach, which is also very good. Obviously, it's a spider, so it's going to have Reach. I think in Standard, you might see this card a little bit being brewed with. It's probably a better card for Commander and Brawl, honestly. Just kind of a very expensive card overall. But I do think as a good rare or a decent bomb in Draft and Sealed, this is definitely going to be one of them for you. And it does have the added advantage if you are in a lot of green stuff in Draft and Sealed to grab something else from your deck, which is nice. Moving on up, we've got another card that needs to be translated. This is the World Soul Colossus, a X and green-white elemental with Convoke, and enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. This card is okay. I mean, it's kind of like Endless One from Battle for Zendikar. It's kind of one of those cards that like it just can do nothing or just be a 2/2. There are those rare instances where this might be a 5/5 in Draft and Sealed, but besides that, it's just going to be like maybe a 3/3 or a 4/4, and I'm just going to feel bad about it. I do think in Standard, this card will likely see 0 play. Maybe Commander and Brawl is where this wants to be, but besides that, I just don't see it. If the Endless One was like X and a 0/0, and this has 2 extra mana requirements on top of it. Convoke makes this a little bit easier in a Draft and Sealed environment, but I still think it's probably just going to come in as like a 4/4, and you're going to be okay with that, I guess. Moving on for us, we've got Wand of the Vertebrae. Why wasn't this Mana Source's card? I feel like Tolarian said this on Twitter. That's why I'm saying it, but this is a Vertebrae here. Why wasn't this Mana Source's preview card? All love Mana Source. All love to you, Wedge. A 1-mana artifact. Put the top card of your library into your graveyard. You can pay to exile Wand of Vertebrae. Shuffle up to 5 target cards from your graveyard into your library. Very interesting. If you notice, we had a card previously in Standard, and probably in Standard right now, obviously, but we'll be rotating once Guilds of Ravnica releases. Perpetual Timepiece is similar to this. But this is not as good as that because it only like shuffles 5 cards instead of your entire graveyard. So that's interesting. I do think this might be cool in a Golgari deck in Draft and Sealed. As far as Standard goes, probably not going to see any kind of play there, but kind of okay in Commander if you got a lot of reanimation stuff going on. Maybe seeing play in a Golgari zombie deck in Standard as well. We'll kind of see where that goes, but I feel like this card is just going to do nothing. Moving on here, we've got Unmoored Ego. Love the art on this. A 3-mana sorcery. Choose a card name. Target opponent's search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name, and exile them. That player shuffles their library, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. This is basically Lost Legacy. They're just replacing Lost Legacy in Standard, which is fine. Lost Legacy is a card that saw some play, some decent cyber play, especially against the combo decks and the Approach the Second Sun decks, but those are leaving Standard once this card comes in. But it's still going to be a fine card for kind of dealing with any kind of hard to deal with card in an opponent's deck. The best thing about this is that it just grabs a card and can grab 4 copies of that card, so there's no requirement like non-artifact or artifact, which is really nice. So this is just going to be in every Dimir and every Grixis control deck till the end of time in Standard. As far as a Draft and Sealed card, this is bad. Don't pick this in Draft and Sealed. An opponent's likely going to have 1 copy of their rare, so this is a card you definitely don't want to pick into as your Draft and Sealed. Pass this and use it in Standard only. Next up for us, we've got Thousand Year Storm, a 6-mana enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. Oh! This is kind of a challenging card to pinpoint. I know this is not being a good card for Draft and Sealed, obviously. This might be a really cool card to challenge yourself to make a deck for Standard. As far as this card in Commander and Brawl though, this card is insane. It's kind of like Storm, but it only works for your spells and only works for instant and sorcery, so that's interesting. But for 5 mana, or for 6 mana actually, this card is silly. I really want this to work somewhere, and I really want to kind of build a deck around this in Standard, so we'll see what happens there. But looks like it's going to be a Commander-only card, kind of a very casual card. Moving on up, we've got Divine Visitation, a 5-mana enchantment. If one or more creature tokens would be created under your control, that many 4/4 White Angel creature tokens with Flying and Vigilance are created instead. This card is legitimately amazing. Why? For Standard, this card is going to be in probably a green-white Selesnya deck somewhere, or maybe even a Boros deck with the Goblin Warboss. Instead of it creating a 1/1, it creates a 4/4 flyer, which is ridiculous. 5 mana isn't bad for this at all either. I think that's definitely a card that can definitely set up some really cool situations in Standard. As far as Draft and Sealed goes, if you got a lot of creature production, like token production, this card is definitely an auto include if you get into it. But you're probably not going to because it's a Mythic, so you're probably never going to see this in Draft and Sealed. But very, very fun card. As far as this card being Commander and Brawl playable, absolutely go ham on this card forever. This card is ridiculous in those formats as well. This card is insane. I love this. It's kind of wild how this is only 5 mana, not 7 mana. This is crazy. I know we have Anointed Procession kind of leaving the Standard environment right now, but this is slotting right into those decks and making them even better, making 4/4 flyers, which is crazy. But that's going to do it for all of the regular cards. Let's talk about the split cards here, like Connive and Concoct. Connive and Concoct. Connive is a 4-mana sorcery. Gain control of target creature with power 2 or less, and that's forever, which is interesting. We also have Concoct, a 5-mana sorcery. Surveil 3, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Very interesting as well. Not really sure about the impact of this card outside of Draft and Sealed. They're both very powerful cards as far as effect goes, but they're kind of expensive on both sides. One of the comments on this this card here on Mythic Spoiler is that Concoct can put Emrakul into the graveyard and grab it before it shuffles back in, thanks to it being able to surveil. Which is very interesting. So might see some modern play for that because it is, making Emrakul way cheaper. But for Draft and Sealed, this card is just fun for that. And maybe see some against the odds Saffron Olive style stuff for Standard. Next up for us, we've got Assurance and Association. I'm not really sure what's up with the alliteration on these cards, but they're really frustrating and annoying to talk about. 2-mana Assurance here is put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Interesting. 6 mana is create 3 2/2 white, green, and white elf knight creature tokens with vigilance. This is very, very good as a Draft and Sealed card. As far as this card being okay in Standard, it's probably a little too slow for that format. But for Commander and stuff like that, it might see some good play there. I do think, though, the 2 and 6 might be seeing some brew play for standard, but I just feel like this is probably just going to be okay for a draft and seal deck only. Next up, we have the final card for the day. This is Discovery and Dispersal, a 2-mana sorcery for Discovery. This is Surveil 2, then draw a card. And Dispersal is a 5-mana instant. Each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, then discard a card. Very interesting. This is very similar to like maybe a preordain, like a 1 extra mana preordain. Discovery is very, very good for that. I don't think Dispersal will really see any kind of play whatsoever, but I think Discovery as a control player or Dimir player, very powerful, and will likely see lots of standard play, especially we'll see play in Draft and Sealed, and being an uncommon as well, you'll see this quite a bit in Draft and Sealed too. But that is all of the cards I get to talk about today. Holy crap, that was so many. So what do you guys think of the cards down below in the comments? Let me know what you think. Like the video if you like it, subscribe to the channel. My voice, I'm literally losing it, so I gotta get off here and calm my voice down. Hopefully tomorrow's exclusive preview card will excite you guys. I'm not gonna give you any kind of hints or anything, but I am really excited about it, and I do talk about it a little bit at length on that video. And yeah, just going to be excited about that, and excited for new previews tomorrow. Guilds of Ravnica is looking to be one of the more push sets I've seen in years, honestly. I mean, there's so many good cards in this set, it's kind of ridiculous. You have this coming in, you have Kaladesh Dominicat rotating out. I mean, it's just so many good things. Standard is going to be in a great place once October 5th hits. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I love you all, and I will see you in the next one. Peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more awesome MTG content just like this. And make sure to tap the bell icon to be notified whenever a video is made live. If you want to keep watching content, here are 2 more videos for you. This video and many others are sponsored by MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. Buy and sell digital singles to build your online collection today with MTGO Traders, and get your paper singles, accessories, and much more from Cape Fear Games. Whatever your Magic needs, both places have you covered.